What's the best/scariest/most interesting internet rabbit hole you've found? Story 1. I was an active Mormon and researching something for a meeting. I came across a website that had great historical information and didn't at first appear to be an anti-Mormon site. I read that the restoration of the priesthood doesn't have an actual date, and immediately I thought that was BS, because since I was a child, I had read in church publications all about the restoration. I could recite dates, names, places, and what these great religious leaders were thinking at the time. Yeah, about that. This website showed strong evidence that it was all a lie, but I was sure they were wrong, so I set out to prove they had the wrong facts. I started with the church's publications, but dug deeper. I searched for source material on college websites. I found journals and other writings on archive.org. I found websites that pulled together information from a dozen sources and assembled it in a way that was terrifying to read. In 2 weeks of near constant searching, I went from a faithful member to feeling sick, crying, and wanting to tear my own eyes out. Then came anger, and that feeling of betrayal. I spent a couple hours nearly every day for the next year, doing my best to prove everything wrong. I prayed, studied, fasted, and in the end, I had to be spiritually honest. I had been lied to. Edit. I finally understand the statement, RIP inbox. I have responded to dozens of comments. I'm doing my best while pretending to work. Edit 2. My marriage ended after we both found out the truth. After reflection, we were not a good match. In the Mormon faith, you don't have intimacy prior to marriage, so you end up with 22-year-olds that date but don't get intimate. This leads to getting married so you can have intimacy, because having intimacy before marriage keeps you out of the temple, where you are saved. So your salvation is based upon getting to the temple. Without the fear of losing our eternal salvation and family, the marriage crumbled. Story 2. I once had my home Linux server hacked while I was away on winter holiday. Logging in remotely from my grandparents' house, I noticed that the server was behaving oddly. Took a look at the log files and found them truncated, so sent a shutdown command so I could do forensics when I got home. What I ended up finding really did feel like swallowing the red pill. Someone had hacked the server using a recent send mail exploit and resold it to someone who was using it to host an egg drop internet relay chatbot. I logged into the IRC channel that it had been holding open and found a bunch of people sending short messages like CCs or root. About 5 minutes in, a longer message comes along. Some guy is annoyed with the trade he has made. Someone gave him a bad set of data, and he wants to make his own data worthless in return before the buyer can get full use of it. So on my screen, there's suddenly a splat of information about some guy who lives in Texas, credit card, phone number, street address, and the first guy is urging everyone to buy stuff as quickly as possible before the credit limit is hit. Feeling I was fricked, I disconnected ASAP. Left an anonymous phone message on said Texas individual's answering machine advising them to check their Visa charges, and hoped that my lack of foresight in not setting up an IP proxy or anything to hide my own identity wouldn't have either the FBI or organized crime breathing down my neck in a few days. Story 3. The Cloverfield ARG, alternative reality game. Basically, when the trailer came out, people were finding things which then led to secret websites which would have to be investigated to find more clues about the movie. It's far too much to type out here, but it went very deep. This has happened with both Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane, and we're expecting it to happen when the God Particle, or whatever the third one is named, comes out. r/Cloververse is the subreddit for it. Here's one example. During the trailer for 10 Cloverfield Lane, we noticed they were drinking Swamp Pop, which was found as a real company in Los Angeles. People later bought 4-packs of it. With the 4-packs, people were getting puzzle pieces. In the movie, one of the characters is doing a puzzle, but was frustrated because he couldn't finish it, as there were missing pieces. It's little stuff like that which makes it fun. Another person found GPS coordinates and found a box buried, and it had a USB drive in it. Turns out the USB had some audio files on it related to the movies, before they came out. Oh, and if you want to try that pop, World Market carries it. I highly recommend the Praline Cream Soda. Story 4. I found out I had a stalker from high school when I was in community college, and decided to Google my name for some dumb reason. I don't have a very common last name, but there are still a few other people out there with my first and last name. I was like 10 pages deep in Google, a place many do not ever go to, and I found an old tripod site that had my name in the URL, followed by one of my old AIM screen names. So I clicked it, and I was taken to a very basic page that had a ton of pictures stolen from my MySpace and others that had to have been taken without me knowing. Things like me out working on my car or on the trampoline with my siblings in our yard. It was really weird, and I had no clue who it was, until I scrolled all the way down and realized it was the girl I dated for a few months in spring of our sophomore year. She had a screenshot of an AIM conversation where I said I liked you way more than others, or something on it, and she took that and ran with it. Story 5. A few years ago, I developed pneumonia. I was out of commission for about a week. My kids were at school, my wife was at work, and I was at home just trying to not stop breathing and keep as warm as possible. I saw an article about some members of the British royal family. Then I said, I wonder if any other countries really have active royal families. So I started Googling and began researching the Norwegian royals. Then I found myself on the Wikipedia article for Ari Bahn. It said he was a baptized member of the Christian community. Having done quite a bit of reading on the subject of religion, I was surprised I had never heard of this group. This was a massive rabbit hole. You learn about the Christian community, and that leads you to Rudolf Steiner, who leads you to biodynamics, Waldorf education, and anthroposophy. The bonus was that I felt like I learned a lot about something I was unaware of. The downside was that the next week I went back to work having dedicated myself to the subject full-time and didn't know what to do with all that knowledge or information. Story 6. Hacker's Canyon, the closest thing to a legitimate unsolved mystery I have ever found. This website has been live on the internet for over 10 years. There are thousands of pages with some really strange content, and despite the pure size of it all, the email addresses on the website are still being replied to after all this time. I have no idea what is going on with that website, but there's no documentation on it, no Wikipedia article, no big forum discussion, absolutely nothing. I've tried to discuss this topic on the internet multiple times in an attempt to pique someone's interest enough to help me work it out, to finally solve it all, but I've never been able to get anyone interested. I'm 23 now, and I've spent the majority of my life on the internet, and there's absolutely nothing I've seen that has baffled me more than that site. Here's an archived post I made about it on 4chan a while back if anyone's curious. The website is discussed so little, this link is one of the top 5 Google results. archive.4plebs.org/x/thread/140302889/. Story 7. OpenSecrets.org. Look up your legislator's donors, then go to govtrack.us and look at the legislation they sponsor, co-sponsor, and vote on. Surprise! I found my congressman pushed for continuing a Fed tax break on soda ash. I called him, and his office said it was for jobs and pressure from China, but will only cost $30 million. The last time it was passed, they also did an impact study. No extra jobs? Pressure? They raised their prices 60% over that 4-year period and were an extra $1.5 billion more profitable. To add insult to injury, it wound up costing $150 million as mining operations simply shifted to federal lands for the break. Who was his number 2 donors? You can already guess. Story 8. I bought a rooted phone and have had to educate myself with how to use custom ROMs, the software that runs your phone. In doing so, I have learned a healthy fear of all things tech. The amount of stuff that third parties do, as a matter of fact, with your data and private info is absolutely bonkers. Background processes, scripts, permissions, and loads of stuff your phone came preloaded with. It is all there to track you, follow you, keep tabs on you, market you, predict you, identify you, and take advantage of you. Trust no one. We are being spied on. We line up for Nurse Ratched's sugar-coated pills with each new device. Story 9. Every now and then I look at all the proposed inevitable long-term physics repercussions that will wash over the universe, like the erosion of Niagara Falls, the loss of gravitational tidal lock with the moon, and the last star dying in the cosmos type stuff. Wikipedia.org/wiki/timeline of the far future. Edit. This was way more attention than I've ever gotten on the internet. A thumbs up for all of you. But if you like my ramblings, I do a podcast I don't advertise called The Panderers, which is kind of like this. YouTube The Panderers. Holy smokes, folks. P.S. I love all your responses, especially the 600 million years C3 synthesis response. Story 10. For cool stuff, Wikipedia's list of unusual articles. For a mixture of strange, sad, hilarious, and frightening, sometimes all three at the same time, fundies say the darndest things got me through a lot of slow times back in the day. There was one thread in particular which achieved glory when the original quoted poster turned up and ended up performing an online exorcism on an FSTD tier to expel the demon that was apparently making her lesbian. But in general, there was plenty of golds. Flat earthers, space deniers, moon deniers, disbelief in DNA, disbelief in primates, all sorts. Story 11. CESLetter.com. As a true blue, fully devout Mormon, I stumbled upon r/ex-Mormon and the aforementioned CES Letter. I read the 80-page document in a couple of hours, diving deep into church history records in every rabbit hole I could find. Verified it all. My world crumbled. I left the church, got divorced. My entire family calls me sinner and apostate when all I wanted was the truth. Sometimes I wish I could climb out of that rabbit hole and never put my nose in it. Story 12. r/subreddit simulator. It's nothing but bots talking to each other using Markov chains of the subreddits they represent. It's hilarious and also kind of disturbing. All these bots just firing off responses, trying to seem like people. Gets even weirder if you try to imagine it as a physical place. A bunch of physical representations of subreddits spouting off what sounds like gibberish to each other, undeterred that they make no sense. Story 13. It's not a specific channel, but I often get lost in the creepy side of YouTube. It starts with a few stupid videos about ghosts or aliens. By the end of it, I'm listening to stories about real people and human taxidermy. I've learned that real people are far, far more disturbing than any ghost or monster story. It leaves me feeling creeped out and gross, but also fascinated. I highly suggest giving it a go. Story 14. Early in the 90s, I reached a site on the eastern coast of Newfoundland that simply read, "You have reached the end of the internet. Turn around and go back." I don't think it's the same one, but www.com.com used to say something like, "Congratulations, you've reached the last page of the internet. Now turn off your computer and go outside." Story 15. In 2012, a university administrator gave me the IP address of this old college server that held hundreds and hundreds of pages of HTML sites, MIDI files, and MS Paint IPGs linked to this little dark net. Finding something that was lost and forgotten on some old server with people's stories, comics, and poetry was awesome. Of course, I lost the IP. I like to think it's still online. Story 16. There's this series on YouTube called the Marble Olympics. I'm on mobile, so I'll link it later, but this guy basically made different events and puts teams of marbles through them and color commentates. The production value isn't bad considering what it is, and you will start rooting for a team. Story 17. The cigarette review community on YouTube. So strange. One guy in particular changed from a cigarette review channel to a channel documenting his fight against lung cancer and his chemotherapy journey. Then a final goodbye video. youtube.com/user/RJ the Story 18. David Mitchell Soapbox. The rabbit hole just kept on going. After the soapbox, I saw all the videos of Peep Show, then the Mitchell and Webb Show. When that ended, I got into Would I Lie to You? Then, worst of all, I ended up with Quite Interesting. It's a still ongoing binge. Story 19. Board James. Started out as a board game review. By season 3, it's much more than that. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.